Welcome, Sifu Rubia. I've been looking forward to our conversation.
Me too, Shilpa. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here and be with your audience and talking about energy and movement.
Yes. Well, your book, your content, and your overall message really does resonate, particularly with this month's topic on movement and energy, or what I call it, movement and healing.
Mm.
And I do find your story fascinating, but unlike many of my podcasts, I think I'm going to start in a counterintuitive way because I really also enjoyed the privilege you gave me of going through parts of your book. And I have in my notes here, co-creating with the stars. So maybe you could just share what that means, because I have some things I'd like for the audience to know about the book.
Okay, so it's a book on its own, and there's also a video series attached to the book. So the video series came first, and the book came second, because I found that in the videos, I didn't really get into a lot of some of like the refinements and the topics of astrology. So I created a book to kind of go along with it. So there's whatever you find in the video series, you'll find in the book, and then there's more in the book than the video series. So and it's called Co-Creating with the Stars, an exploration of as above, so below, where I've bridged the language of Western astrology to a set Qi Gong system that I've been practicing for over a decade now. So I just started bringing some points together between the two, and this is that exploration, and that this body of work is that. So it's very exciting.
Yeah, and in the book, well, I went through the video series, correct? I think
Yes.
what I've been, yeah, that video series, for those who are listening, is beautifully designed and very nicely laid out in terms of the astrological charts and the modalities that you suggest one can practice. And speaking of the modalities, maybe I'm going to back up a little bit. In this book, you talk about the aspects and use a lot of astrological, what I call, concepts.
Mhm.
For those who might be curious, perhaps you can share, does one need to have their charts done before they can go deeper in the book?
That's a great question, and I bring that up in the introduction of the book, that it's not a course that will necessarily lead you towards reading your birth chart. That's not really the goal. The goal is to introduce you to the language and fundamental understandings and topics around astrology. So it's really, if you've never heard or done any astrology, then this is, if your mind has always been curious about it, this is a great introduction to the language. So we talk about aspects, houses, archetypes, the planets, the sun, the zodiacal signs, and really just understanding language. So you can leave this course listening to another astrologer, and you'll start at least understanding what they're saying, because it can be a little confusing if you know nothing about astrology. What do they mean when they're saying, Mars is squaring Venus? What does that mean? Or Jupiter is quincunx the sun. Like, what does that mean? So this is really an introduction to those words, those ideas, and calculations and concepts and archetypes. So I break them down individually, and then I kind of bring them together with the Qi Gong. Yeah.
Now, while we do not need to necessarily have our charts ready to understand how to go through the movements, I'm curious, let's say there's a certain planetary position going on next week.
Mm-hmm.
And it, and from what I've understood in your book, they do affect humans in specific ways. And depending on your birth chart, it may be affecting you in a certain way. So as before we hit record, I told you, well, I know I have a temperament, and so perhaps that affects the liver, but maybe that is something that was in my charts. Now that I'm aware, though, the awareness part, the energy awareness of myself, from my understanding, I can now find the right movements in your video and books to practice. Is that
Correct.
right?
Yes, that's correct. So you can use the book and the videos in the ways that suit you. So the information are the information is there. And let's say, like you're saying, you get agitated easily, or there's something that's, you find challenging. Again, the liver is often the organ that gets hit the most with anger. And I go through that in the each topic as well, which meridian is associated to which organ, and then when that meridian is imbalanced, I share some emotions that could be tied to that. So in this case, the liver, anger, definitely. There's not a meridian, but there's the movement, I think, again, number 9, which is Sagittarius. And in medical astrology, which this is not a book on medical astrology, but in medical astrology, Sagittarius is attached to the liver. So yeah, there's a movement there called Gather and Offer that helps transcend and soften that liver meridian, and also the actual physical liver with the turning of the waist and whatnot. So there's that dynamic there as well. So it's embodying the cosmos, as above, so below. So it's really kind of making those connections. Depression is something that a lot of us go through, which affects our pericardium meridian, the heart meridian, I think the spleen and the stomach as well, but the heart meridian, lungs are associated with grief. So there's beautiful movements in the book, in the video series, to really help soften those emotions. I think one of them is called Lifting the Sky, Painting the Sky. The other one is called Golden Eagle Spreads Wings. And there's another one called Clearing the Gallbladder. So again, if you can identify an emotion within, then there's a movement that's shared that will help you manage that emotion.
Just a little bit of a tangent question, though, because as you know now, based on what I've shared about my personality, science and connecting the science to what I call the spiritual practices often fascinates me. You said there's medical astrology, which is not necessarily covered in this book, but I imagine in that field, they've already done studies where they recognize that clearing certain meridians does help with the healing process. Is that correct?
Absolutely. I mean, any gentle movement that you're doing is supporting your whole system. So that's why they call them holistic practices. So you're yes, clearing the mind, helping the nervous system, but you're also, especially with movement therapies like Tai Chi and Qi Gong, you're really working on movement, being supported and guided by the waist. So, and everything is, all of our vital organs are there. So gentle twists, gentle turns, gently massaging all of the internal organs, liver, adrenals, kidneys, the intestinal tract, all of that. So movement is it's a healing process. Yeah. And then it gets further broken down with energy lines and energy meridians, which is Eastern medicine. That there are practices like medical Qigong as well, which, again, this is not a medical book. I really do want to, and I make that clear in the book several times, that this is not that. However, the coming back to medical astrology, all of the organs are appropriately associated to the planets and the zodiacal signs. So they're lined up that way. but I don't bring an emphasis on it specifically.
Yeah, and that's definitely something that fascinated me. As I had mentioned to you, while I am aware of astrological as science or charts and know that, well, I'm an Aries, but beyond that, I had not gone deep until I read or went through your video. And suddenly I'm looking up terminologies, as you mentioned, there are
Yeah.
terminologies, and I enjoyed it. I thought, okay, so the I guess the charts can speak to the meridians, somehow mapping it there conceptually.
Mm-hmm.
And based on that information, we can go deeper into which Qigong movements we can practice, which is, I find it fascinating.
So yes, it is fascinating, and the body of work is having the effect that I set it out to do, which is pique your curiosity even more. So if you're not familiar with either topics, then it's, you're engaging in something that's new to you, and it evolves into even being more curious. So I'm a Gemini rising, so curiosity comes naturally to me. So you said you're an Aries, so Aries, that's your sun sign, but I even go through this in the video series and the book, that your rising sign is actually the sign that you express in most, because it's in your first house, which again, we talk about the houses and how every house is relates to a life topic, money, friends, home, work, life, sex, all of it. So every house has a specific area of life. So you technically could print out your birth chart and go through the material and start looking at your birth chart differently. All the information, again, that I put in that body of work, you could look at your birth chart, although that's not the goal, but it could give you a deeper understanding if you're good at putting the pieces of a puzzle together, which it sounds like you are. You like putting puzzle pieces together. So and if you're not good at puzzles, that's fine too. It's very straightforward information. Again, we talk about archetypes. Everything is astrology really works a lot around archetypes. So once you understand the archetype of either the planet or the zodiacal sign, then the aspects uh, have a way to express themselves through the archetype. So it's interesting that way. Astrology is interesting that way. Now it tells stories.
Absolutely. Now that I've had this new gained perspective on it, yeah, I'm definitely going deeper into it. And I want to understand, like you were saying, what is the rising? What did you call that?
Your rising sign. So at the moment you took your first breath, it's the furthest point on the eastern horizon. So we're all born at different times, different locations on the planet. So the furthest eastern point, wherever that was in the sky and the zodiacal wheel, that's your rising sign. And you can only find that out if you know your exact time of birth,
Okay.
because that changes every couple of hours as the sun rises.
Yeah.
That point changes.
Wonderful. Well, I do know my exact moment I was born, so I'll try to find that out.
Yeah, yeah.
So the chart itself is it's a full circle broken down into four parts, and then there are houses. And then within your video book, you break down the information and you offer, I say, Qigong movements that speak to you. They're not necessarily some prescribed ones, or are they?
Well, that's a good question. It's an important question. So the Qigong system is an actual system. So you have really great Qigong teachers out there who are sharing their work on social media and doing a lot of great things. So definitely explore all of it. Any kind of gentle movement is a good prescription. Be mindful of not hurting yourself, but for the most part, qigong and tai chi are gentle modalities for your body. But this is an actual system. In the system, meaning it has a beginning, a middle, and an end, right? So it starts by opening up certain meridians, which, well, it starts by grounding you. And then you start by opening up one meridian at a time. And then you're, at the end, it's almost like you're flushing it all out. Whatever you've kind of churned up, you end up flushing out and then flushing out the bad and then condensing the good. So it's complete. So it's a system that has a beginning, middle, and end. So again, I've been practicing this system for X amount of years, over a decade. And when I started studying astrology only 2.5, 3 years ago, I started kind of making some bridges to the content and the information. Yeah.
And in one part of your book, I noticed, or the video part, that, and correct me if I'm articulating this incorrectly, but it says something about, you look at the house and then there may be a meridian, and in your training in this course, it's one house, only one house to one meridian to one movement, but that's not always the way it is, but that's the way you've laid it out.
That's how I've laid it out. Yes. So again, this is presented in a playful way for information. And then coming back to, and I may be repeating myself here, but medical astrology, again, does associate a sign and a body part. And I've kept those pretty much in line. And there might be some medical astrologers that would challenge some of it, but I mean, I don't know. I would welcome them to challenge it. It's fine. I'm happy with the results of the information that's there. There's nothing wrong. There's not necessarily like a whole expansion on, specifically medical Qigong or medical astrology, which is not what this is. So I associate a house, a planet, a zodiac sign, an organ, a meridian system, a meridian line, energy line, and a movement. So all of those are tied in together, and they work. They're again, this is my exploration that I'm sharing with you. There's nothing that couldn't be challenged or explored further. I would be certainly open to all of that. Yeah.
And that framework you articulated, it came through. It was very enjoyable knowing that you went from what I consider like a meta concept of the astrological position, and then understanding the house and going further deeper, and then landing to the place where you can tie the meridian to the movement. And then you also mentioned in it, your training, that there are practical applications, which a lot of the content that I like to share with my audience often does tie into science as well as practicality. And I like the fact that you do, even like there's a prayer for vitality, which who doesn't need vitality?
I love that movement too. That's again, you're setting up your practice. So it's like you're releasing, you're praying to the gods, you're setting your intention for the practice, because I think it's like the second movement of the body of work or the system. So yeah, and some of the names I've kept originally as I taught them, and then some of them I've changed, but for the most part, yeah, they're another one of my favorite is removing the mask. So the third movement. Did you get to that one? Yeah, that's that's also, you hit some of the liver there and the gallbladder. So just the fact of brushing your brow in a gentle way just softens your face. So yeah, that's another favorite of mine. And I also give out affirmations, things that you can meditate on while you're doing the movement as well.
Absolutely. And I do love the affirmations you bring in, like, for instance, the prayer for vitality early into the movements. I am rooted in both my earth body and my divine body, which is, I find it very relevant for myself because sometimes I get so cerebral and I need to get more grounded.
Mhm.
But
We're intellectual beings. That's the gift that we have as humans and organic beings, is that we have our intellect. That's what separates us from the animal kingdom. But we can get very disconnected from our body. So that brings us, these types of modalities brings it all together in a holistic
yeah,
holistic way. Yeah.
it wasn't until more recently, and I've shared some of that before we hit record, that I would feel a deeper connection with what I call subtle energy. And that's
Mm-hmm.
why this category was inspired, this energy awareness, because I do have a better sense of awareness
Mm-hmm.
in the last few years. So when you were talking about unveiling the mask, when I did that practice, I literally would feel like this rush of happiness or joy or
Mm.
goosebumps, like an energy. So is that something that this is in my head? Is that for
No,
real?
I mean, if you're having a visceral and somatic, experience to the movement, that's everybody's going to have a different one, and uh, many students share their experiences, and they're all different. So, as long as you're tuned into it, I think there's no wrong, there's nothing wrong. There's
Yeah.
no right or wrong in that. It's bringing you back to the present. I think what catches people by surprise is that the they're realizing how present they are in the moment and in their body, and it's having a visceral experience through you, and how present you become, because these practices require you to do that, or they demand you to do that. I don't know how to say it, but that's what they're for, is to bring you back to the present moment.
Yeah, the movements themselves, right?
Yes, absolutely. And the more you do it, the more you are refining your energy body, your astral body, and you do that through repetition. You do that through discipline, um, devotion, through intention, devotion. All of that kind of expands the work over time. I've
I
heard, sorry,
oh,
I've,
go for it.
I've heard of teachers who their energy body is so refined that they feel their fingertips from the inside.
I I have heard that from the Qigong teacher that I learned Qigong from.
Yeah, it's
The
intense.
first time we did the energy ball, what do they call that? I don't know the technical term, but he may have referred to it as the energy ball,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
creating that energy ball. And literally the first time I did, I thought I actually feel fire in my hands.
Hmm.
And
Yeah, that's usually the first kind of experience that people have, is their palms or fingertips get all warmed up.
yeah.
Yeah.
Now, one of the things I remember, and I wrote it out because I love the way it was articulated in your book, is that, and again, I might be paraphrasing, but the practice of understanding archetype astrology and its connection to Qigong, it's, I believe you said something to the effect of that it gave you a new level of awareness about yourself,
Mm.
behavior, and clarity on why you do approach life the way you have been or may have.
Hmm.
Accurate?
Yeah, that is accurate. So, astrology to me has been a healing tool. And I think the age old saying, know thyself. Every great thinker comes back to that. And astrology brought me deeper into that practice, because I was already in the development of it with my yoga, my tai chi, qigong. So I'm in the cauldron already. But when I started really tapping into astrology, I got a deeper understanding through the archetypes, through the planets, and where they were in my birth chart, and understanding myself, and understanding why I did certain things the way that I did, and or not, or didn't do, and why I was experiencing certain things. And then everything's a cycle. So the planets are in this constant movement, yes, but they're cycles. So everything comes back around. which is also interesting. But coming back to knowing yourself, so the deeper you understand yourself, the more compassion you can extend outward. So once I started understanding that reading a chart really can bring insight into yourself, also not just you but other people, everybody has their own birth chart, everyone is unique, you just start feeling more compassionate. And it was something very noticeable. Like, I noticed that, about that change or that enhancement that astrology was bringing to my life. And their compassion is something that we should all strive for, right? To become more compassionate. Know thyself. It comes back to that. Yeah.
I love that. And it actually is a nice segue, because I feel like we did cover um key aspects of your video in the book. There's so much more deeper that I want to go, so I may have you back.
I'd
um,
love to come back. Yeah, we can do that.
I love it. And I love to study deep, so that'll be fun. Now, as a segue though, I'd love to hear how the movement, how you arrived in it in the journey of your life. But
Mhm.
and from my understanding of what I've read and what I've experienced for myself, that the movement itself is a journey, meaning that life is a movement. But in Qigong, when you're in the movements, you're also becoming more deeply aware of yourself and your energy on a subtle level. But then you're also maybe on a more deeper spiritual level, able to uncover blocks and release them. So is that how you feel? And maybe share your journey.
Yeah, I think everybody has their own experience with that, and whatever we're ready for, will the lesson will arrive. I've had people share with me in the past that, and we're talking again over time. You said this 5 years ago, but for some reason, it's just resonating with me now. So it's really allowing whatever, being open. First of all, you have to be open to receive. If you're blocked off, and your perspective and your attitude in life in general, that first has to change. You really have to be open. So movement for me was part of my healing journey, where when my yoga practice was hurting me more than it was healing me. So, and that happens. Yoga can be a little intense. I have a body where I fall into my joints, so I have to work on different things when it comes to yoga, or the asana practice, not the whole practice of yoga, but the asana practice. So Qigong kind of came into my life to um, to support strength. So it really was a practice that I didn't approach it spiritually at all. That wasn't my intention. It was, I like to move. I need to move. I'm hurt. My yoga is making it worse. What do I do? And so that's where Qigong came into my life. So building strength from the inside out. But the teachers that I had at the time, they tune you inward. So stop thinking about the larger muscle and start thinking about the marrow and the bone. So when you go that far deep into the microcosm, then you're getting into a different space. So for me, it was about building strength. And then yeah, I started building my physical body back, and then the recurring pains that would happen, they wouldn't last as long the more that I practiced. So they would still happen, but the recovery time was a lot shorter based on me doing this practice. So that's how I discovered it. It was not a spiritual approach. And then the more you do it, as I was sharing earlier, the more you're refining your energy body. You're really going into your spine, and that a teacher, an astrologer that I attended a seminar, Cameron Allen, he did a seminar and he said something. He doesn't want to be claimed to have quoted this, so I'm not giving him the quote, but I'm saying I heard it from him. He said the spine is the line to the divine. So you get your spine right, you get your nervous system right, and you can tap into your divine nature. And so that ended up happening for me. That whole process really developed into, you know, a place of self-realization for me, and just like clearly tuning into my divine nature. They say that prayer is speaking to God, and meditation is listening to God. So listening, taking the time to be present and listen, for me, that was the formula to, and then a formula that led me through all of this, and offering this work. So yeah, it can lead you down some really beautiful places, but it's a discipline, it's work, it's, you have to do it.
I just love the unique blend of how you have pulled these concepts together. And in terms of the journey itself, it it's, from what I see, it is a journey, meaning that all of us will continually have to refine our approach to what is working and becoming more aware as we expand. And in your journey, I know you've shared some of this in your bio, but perhaps you can touch upon what level of grief did it take, or maybe, I don't want to use the word trigger because that just doesn't feel right, but what type of grief or journey did it take for you to maybe start becoming more open to other modalities that can help you on your journey?
A big question. I don't know if I'll answer it correctly. I'll try, because you're bringing up grief, and I think grief is something that's always resided in me, for not obvious reasons, but for the reason that I'll share now, is that I was adopted and abandoned on a sidewalk in Bangladesh, in Dhaka, and found in Dhaka. So the grieving part for me has always been there from a very, very young age. But I didn't know I was grieving. You know, you don't grow up knowing that you're grieving until somebody points it out, and you're like, oh, that's what I've been going through. Which, now that you have the information, you know better, you do better, right? So, or you try better. So I don't know. I mean, for me, like I said, everything about my life has been about grief. So I don't know how to separate it from my work, honestly. And then if I come back to what I was sharing about the yoga aggravating my body, and how Qi Gong, you know, helped me restructure everything. I was going through grief. I was grieving. I was going through a miscarriage, or I had gone through a miscarriage, and then that created a recurring back issue for me at the time. So my whole life has been around grief. So the movements that I've done, the yoga that I started exploring when I was 25, I'm 48 now. That yoga practice has been, that's the place that I go to heal. That's why I don't teach yoga. That's another reason why I don't teach it. It's because it's mine. Whereas Tai Chi is not mine. It never felt like it was mine, although it's given me so much. It never felt like it belonged to me, and that's why I give it away and I teach it. But yoga, and as a teacher, every teacher will say this, that you love something so much, you end up teaching it, and then you can't find yourself in it anymore. So I never wanted to lose that from my yoga practice. But Tai Chi, I have, you know, that's the gift. That's, for me, that's the devotional part of it. But once I discovered yoga, and I discovered movement, like gentle, healing, purposeful, mindful movement, not just kickboxing, and, you know, kickboxing and yang movement and martial arts and kung fu. That has its purpose as well, but my heart needed something else. That grieving part of me needed a different space to heal in. That's where yoga came in, and then the Qi Gong and Tai Chi. Again, I don't know if that answers your question.
No, it actually does answer my question. And this could be a part 2 of a future podcast for you and I, because we talked about embodied awareness, sort of pulling together different aspects of, I would say, internal growth and external modalities. But I went through various levels of grieving, and one of them was several miscarriages. And when I tried to foolishly, when I did finally give birth successfully to my boy, Omni, I foolishly decided now I'm going to go become a yoga teacher. I had just barely, he was what, 7, 8 months old. And I struggled. My sciatic nerves were completely raw. And on so many levels, my body just couldn't do the things that it was able to do just 2 years before.
Oh yeah, our bodies change, especially after a miscarriage. Like you were pregnant. Your body was embodying another, human being. Like it doesn't matter what time or weeks or whatever you were pregnant. It changes everything in your body. Sorry, I'll let you continue.
Oh no, I wish I had these conversations. I'm glad that now this podcast serves to serve and help other women, but being more aware, body changes, being more aware that, as you would express about the grief, sometimes being unconscious of it, and then living a life where you're maybe behaving in a way they may not understand. I did that. Different levels. Sometimes fear and anxiety drove me from certain behaviors. So I think the work you put together is allowing people to, it's almost like a journal. It gives you the opportunity to introspect through.
Yeah, I love that. I love that you're getting that from this body of work. Again, this is new, right? I've just released it. It took me over a year to produce and put together. And it's just now coming into the marketplace, and you're launching it with me right now. You're the first person I'm speaking to about it. So thank you for sharing your experience. And I'm glad you took the time to go through some of it before we spoke. I think that was really important. Yeah, I think we're at an interesting point in time in our human history, and astrology will say that, and I don't necessarily want to get into that, but more people are doing yoga, more people are trying to embody their or release emotions from their body that they know are there, and they're looking for ways to let them live elsewhere but in your body. And just coming back to grief for a moment, a lot of anger is grief that's unprocessed. And if you really think about it, any kind of really big, deep negative emotions all root back to grief, all root back to loss. And something that my master teacher told me very long time ago, and it's a saying that goes in the Taoist philosophy and in the Tai Chi community, is invest in loss. I never understood it. And any time I asked him to explain it to me, he would never explain it, because it means different things at different points in your life. But the act of investing in loss is a lifetime thing. It's something that you need to continuously do. We're always in a moment where we're losing something. We're losing time, we're losing breath, we're losing everything at any point in time. We're in loss. So it's investing in knowing that we're always losing something. And so when the big losses come, they're a little easier to bear, I guess. That's my takeaway from that statement, because it always sits with me. I've thought about it for a long time, and he's never explained it to me. And I don't think it wasn't for him to explain it to me.
And
But
does it feel like it also ties in? I mean, it resonates with me, and I feel like perhaps it also ties in with the notion of being present in the moment.
yeah, we need to discover tools to bring us back to that, because there's nothing else really. There's nothing else nowhere else to be. I mean, anxiety, you're too much in the future. Depression, you're too much in the past. And joy is in the present. Present is a gift. So anyway, we've all heard that one before, is what I'm saying. So yeah, and these practices bring you to your breath, bring you to your present moment.
So, in parting, though, my notes said something to me that I wanted to kind of share with you. If I had to summarize what so far the content that I did cover,
Mhm.
of course, feels like healing through energy awareness is really something that is highlighted, and that the movements are what do I call it? Moving meditations.
Mhm.
And it feels like moving meditations. Perhaps you can share what your insights are on that and how it ties to healing as well as energy awareness.
I mean, that's why I bring affirmations, because when we can attach a word to what we're doing, or a story to what we're doing, we're helping the neuroscience, which I wouldn't be able to explain, but I know it's there. And help supporting neuroplasticity and all of that stuff. Again, I'm not a neuroscientist, but neuroscientists would support this type of work, and that you create a story, you bridge that story to a healing movement. And that's why in this course, I also offer little, like, 3D videos of the meridians. I'm sure you saw that along the way. So the visual component, the mantra component, with the affirmation, so the vibration of sound as you say the affirmation, and then adding the movement. So you're really creating like a healing environment for yourself through these the visual, the sound, the movement, everything coming together. Um, yeah, because the movements are so simple and so gentle, they're easy for everyone to really try. And the ones that are more complicated, I make sure I say, this is really advanced, skip it, don't do it. But 10 out of the 12 are really gentle movements. So if you haven't been physically active for a long time, this is be gentle with yourself as you start. Run it by your doctor, say, hey, look at this, what do you think? But for the most part, it's definitely a gentle entryway into a journey, and I've always referred to it as my soft place to land. These practices that I've developed, this is where, when life is overcomes, because it always will, the chaos will never go away, these are the places I softly land. So I've created the space for myself through these gentle practices. Yeah.
And the way you mentioned that, yes, you in your video show the meridians, you
Mhm.
with different information. I do feel like it's an embodied system that you've created that helps. And back to the neuroplasticity,
Yeah.
yes, the affirmations, and again, I'm not an expert, but from what I do know, that repetitive sounds, repetitive words
Mhm.
create new neural pathways. And then when you make those connections physiologically to the meridians, again, that's reinforcing.
Yes.
And so it's all, in my mind, still very scientific.
Yes, it is. Absolutely. You know, absolutely. I mean, my approach has always been more spiritual, but spirit and science have always kind of walked hand in hand throughout time.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's why I have created on a side Science of Spirituality series, which I think you would be a wonderful
Oh,
guest.
wow.
Yeah, so we'll go deeper in future podcasts, but I truly enjoyed our conversation.
No, me too. Thank you for sharing and bringing your take on it, your perspective and your curiosity more importantly. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. And until next time, have a great weekend.
Thank you, Shilpa. Happy movement to you.
Happy movement.